And as officers, that's how we grow. We learn the most from our mistakes. But you have to admit to them, acknowledge them. This was the scariest thing I've ever done.
Remember back in 2020 when the entire country was grappling with a pandemic that shook us to the core. It was a time when precautions like washing hands and wearing masks became the norm. And in some places, you were mandated to get the jab. One such place was the city of Los Angeles, where even city employees, including police officers, were required to get poked. But what happens when a seasoned officer decides to take a stand against the mandate? Today, we meet Barbara Riggs, affectionately known as Bobby, who faced termination after a remarkable 32-year career with the LAPD. Bobby specialized in teaching active shooter training, tactical force application, and the ins and outs of operating emergency vehicles. Her story is a compelling one, shedding light on the disciplinary process she endured and the lessons learned along the way. Welcome to Internal Affairs, a police podcast. Let's go. Okay, here we are with another special guest, Barbara Riggs, aka Bobby.
Yes.
Kind of help me understand, Bobby, that's what everybody calls you in the department, or it's been around before you and came on the job as a police officer, or what was that like?
Well, I was number 9 of 10 kids, and my older brothers and sisters voted on the younger ones' names, and they voted on Barbara. My dad didn't like Barbara, so he said that that's going to be her name. We're going to call her Bobby. So I've been Bobby since I came out.
He wasn't having it.
No.
How did that sit with the academy? Did you have to explain that you weren't Barbara, but hey, call me Bobby? Or?
No, I was Matzel, and we didn't have first names back then. It was just
right. We were just a number, and we get through
a
it.
number and a last name.
Exactly.
And you didn't want to hear that called.
I appreciate you coming. I know you and I have so much to talk about. We're going to touch on a topic that happened a couple of years ago. That's, I suppose, we can say it's sensitive, it's critical. And it's important, which is the reason why I thank you for showing up to the podcast. But let's get right to it with the first segment. So let's go. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, rate the importance of internal affairs in a police department and why.
I'd say 10.
Okay.
Policing attracts all sorts of people, and some people have the calling, some people do it because it sounds fun. Their perception has been molded by the TV and media of what policing is, and it's quite different than what we see on TV. But, different people come from different reasons, and I think it also attracts some predators, some people that shouldn't be police officers.
100% in agreement to know that, not everybody has a really good heart and wants to do God's work.
Yes.
Because we see the worst.
Yes.
We experience the worst, and our emotions are just flying up and down every single day. And I know as a 32-year veteran, mental wellness was not something that was thought about. I'm certain that you and I can relate that when you went home, there was a period where you just had to maybe just kind of decompress a little bit because of everything that happened on that particular shift. So, sometimes we're evil, and internal affairs is the necessary evil, as one of my guests has said it in the past.
Yes, I did hear that, and I agree, 100%.
Good. Fill in this sentence for me. As an internal affairs investigator, my job is to what?
Investigate allegations, unbiased, and follow where the investigation leads you, no matter what you might believe. I think, and I've had, life's about lessons, And I've had lots of lessons on this department where we judge a book by its cover only to find out that you were completely wrong. And I think sometimes when we go into investigations that we might be biased one way or the other.
Yes.
And we can steer that investigation just because of what we think, instead of looking at the information that you're receiving and look at it and analyze it and say, maybe I'm not right. Maybe my feelings aren't right. This is where it's taking me, and follow it. And just be an unbiased investigator. This is what I found out. This is what I have.
It's almost as if the more guests to come in and explain this particular fill in the blank, I tend to think that it's almost like you had somewhat of an expectation. Like you look at this complaint, or you're like, oh, it's him or it's her, whatever. And that kind of, like you said, it leads you to have these pre-notions that perhaps they did do some alleged misconduct, or maybe not.
Right.
Or there's no way Bobby did it.
Right.
And that can cause, that can cause some issues and some problems. So I totally agree that you should be completely unbiased, have no expectations. And I was going to ask you, I know you were a sergeant. At one point you did a couple of intakes. Would it be fair to say that wherever it leads you, sometimes where it leads you, have you experienced where they get lazy, or they just don't really want to turn every single stone, if you will?
As far as...
Have you had an experience where, it's supposed to lead you this way and it's got to lead you that way, wherever that investigation goes, but some people just don't even go there?
And it's not even with internal affairs. It's with investigations from P2s and P3s. Yeah. Sometimes officers or detectives will do 10 times the amount of work to get out of doing something than it would have taken if they just would have done it and get it over with.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate about filling in the blanks. Let me ask you this particular question. Look, we are known for certain nicknames. I'm sure you heard them all. The dark side, which, by the way, it is a dark side. I don't think that's something bad. There is moments of darkness when
yes,
you investigate, and there's a lot of moments of darkness when you go through it, which I'm sure that we'll talk about a little bit later on. But it is the dark side, so there's nothing like real negative about that stigma that Internal Affairs has. But it has all these other nicknames like, hey, you guys are Blue Falcons or desk jockeys or the Rat Squad. You've been around for 32 years. I wonder to ask you, where did we get that nickname? Or what? I shouldn't say where. How come we get that particular negative image of internal affairs? Not just in LAPD, but I suppose in every police department. What do you think?
Well, I have an idea of where it comes from. And it goes with police officers. You have, sometimes some people shouldn't be police officers in their interaction with the public. You have one chance, generally. I mean, some people have multiple contacts with police officers, but that's few and far between. Most people maybe will have one or two. And you have a huge impact on how they feel about police in that one contact.
Yes.
So internal affairs is a necessary evil. I truly believe that.
Yes.
And I have friends that work there. I've never worked there.
Right.
But I've never went over to the dark side. But I've had friends, and they do a great job. And, there are bad people on this department that need to be investigated and disciplined. But there are a lot of good people that get falsely accused. And
yes,
they do a good job at following the information, whatever the evidence leads, and doing a good, thorough, unbiased investigation.
I know that's.
And there are investigators from IA that take it personally. And I've been interviewed by IA several times, and most of them have been great people. Just they're doing their job. But I've been interviewed one time where they came after me. I wasn't even the accused, and it was like, do I owe you money? I mean, really? What did?
Right.
So when you have people like that, that might be that officer's only contact with an IA investigator, and it left a bad taste in their mouth. So now you become a suit, you become the dark side, you become, because
A suit.
yes,
I like that.
because IA
That's
they wear
right.
suits. They don't.
That's right.
Rarely do you see them in uniform, but that's that one contact that officer had with IA that soured them to that whole process.
If we could turn back the clock to 1989, 1990 is when you were out on probation, and
But I did come on in the 80s.
That's right.
1089.
That's right. 1089. Hoorah! We're going to talk about that. My follow-up question to that is there? Can you remember if any of your field training officers or anyone in that division back then had something to say about IA, or did you already have this like pre-notion that, oh my God, IA is just, these guys are just bad, man?
I did my probation in 77, and they did not have a big or a good view of IA
Right.
from when I came on.
Correct.
So, sometimes your perception is molded by what other people say until you have an experience. And you're like, they're not that bad. What are you talking about?
Right.
Or that guy deserved it. Or,
Yeah.
they did a good job exonerating this officer. But when you're first on, and then we had Rodney King happen while I was on probation.
Yeah.
So it kind of changed the temperature of the department, and it was weird times.
Oh, absolutely. And I say that because it goes back even probably to like the 40s or the 1950s. Someone reminded me that there was an episode on Dragnet about internal affairs, and they had this image like, oh my God, they're out to get you, and be careful because they're rats. They're going to do something, put something on you. And of course, you and I both know about Lieberger, Officer Lieberger in the 70s. The Lieberger admonition. We get into that some other time. But yeah, no, I appreciate that, especially with someone who's been around. I always wonder when you were a young police officer if, you had this notion like, oh my God, internal affairs is just this big monster, and you know what, stay away from them. But
Yeah, we'd see you guys walking in the station. You're like, oh, the suits are here.
that's right.
Who's in trouble?
Yes. We touched on the next segment, a trip down memory lane, and let's get right to it. I do know you were here in the 80s, October of 1989. Let's see. You were a police officer, too, assigned to West Valley. And that's where you were but you were in 77 as a probationer.
Yes.
Then you got transferred,
Yes.
which normally happens after the 1 year mark, to the San Fernando Valley, the 818, my proud residency where I've been for over 40 years. I'm all about the 818, and you just probably thought to yourself, I didn't even know they actually had a San Fernando Valley. Is that correct?
That is correct. When I drove out to go to the station and bring my stuff, I was driving, and I was driving, and I was driving. Like, are we still in the city? I didn't know that the San Fernando
Yeah.
Valley was part of
That's
LA.
right.
It-
The 101 just didn't even exist to you.
No,
The 101 freeway.
No.
It's total. The riots. Question: where were you in the 1992 riots on the day of the decision when they pretty much said guilty or not guilty?
I was working morning watch at the time,
Mm-hmm.
and it was a day off, and my roommate and I we were partners. We're watching
The verdict.
the verdict on the TV,
Uh-huh.
and then they cut away to Florence and Normandy. Like, we're going to get called in. And sure enough, we got called in, went, and then we got sent down to the bus depot
Right. Some bus depot in downtown LA.
and sat there and sat there and sat there. It gave a whole new meaning to standing by. It was hours. And you could see when we drove over the hill
Uh-huh.
into downtown, there were fires everywhere. It was surreal. And then now we're in the middle of South Central with just these fences around us, hundreds of police officers waiting. And you hear shots fired. You know, you could see the smoke from the fires and waiting. And we had to be there about 2.5 hours, and here comes the chief. He was at some function that night.
Uh-huh.
And everybody at the command post where we were at,
Mm-hmm.
were looking at each other like, you make a decision. And I don't know, I wasn't in there, but I could only imagine that they're like, you make a decision. No, I'm not making a decision. Oh, we'll wait for the chief. So the chief probably thought, well, I'll wait here.
While they make a decision.
Yes. And then finally he had to show up. And then it was probably 5 minutes after he showed up that we were deployed out into the streets.
And watch the city burn.
Yes.
How many days? A couple of days? Probably worked.
We went down there probably for 2 or 3 days, and then we'd get bussed down there and took an RTD bus. Back then it was RTD.
Mm-hmm.
And bunch of coppers sitting on the bus watching people loot stores, and
Right.
it was crazy.
Yeah, no, I can only imagine. That's why I like asking the questions, because each one of my guests that experienced that, comes from different points of views. Appreciate you sharing that. We made a field training officer, promoted in 1996-97. I do know that you worked Hollywood Prostitution Enforcement Detail, Hollywood
did.
Vice. It's the alum, it's the best, it's the cream of the crop, like one of our guests said.
Yes.
And
And I would agree.
That was a really good job, I would imagine. Long hours at night
It was
on
probably
Hollywood Boulevard.
Yes, and it was before the loitering laws, 653. So Sunset Boulevard was just full of prostitutes. And I will say that was probably the hardest job I've ever had on this department, bar none. And it was due to, we'd arrest these girls and we'd have to drive them from Hollywood to Van Nuys, which sometimes could take a long time.
Correct.
And you're sitting in the back seat before we had cages. You sat back there with them, and you talked to them. And the story was consistent. They came out here from the Midwest, somewhere, wherever, on a bus to Hollywood to make it. And these are, they're pretty girls. And they came out to make it famous. And they were met at the bus stop by the pimps saying, hey, I'll make you famous. I'll get you in and take them in, get them hooked on drugs. And then they were their property. And, I tell them, go home. And they're like, I can't go home. After what I've done, I can't go home. It broke my heart. And I'd have the same conversation with them. And and you knew that once they got out and bailed out, because we'd take their money, that they were probably going to get beat up for getting caught by the police. Yeah. And it was hard. And once they started recognizing the human trafficking, that, these girls, if they had a choice, they wouldn't be out on the street.
Right.
I met one prostitute and I wish I could remember her name, and we kind of had a love-hate relationship. I had to respect her. She did it to give her kid the education and the chance that she never had. So she was out there. She didn't have a pimp. And she was putting him in private school and was doing it for him, which I don't agree by the means, but, I don't know.
Yeah.
It was a really hard job.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. Thanks for sharing. And your sentiment is so spot on with, the empathy that you need to do this job, and how many people have it, how many people are even equipped to do that. It goes to the point that we were talking about earlier about whether or not this is the job for you. So I appreciate that. I know you made field training officer P3 back in 1996-97, and you were a field training officer. You got to train some recruits right out of the academy.
I did, and those are usually the ones I got.
Nice. And then lo and behold, 10 years later, congratulations, you make sergeant, March of 2007, and now you can really make an impact, because I truly believe that sergeant is probably the best rank, certainly in our beloved LAPD, because you get to make an impact on the troops, right? Your officers, your field training officers, and you also get to provide that leadership that the lieutenants are too busy, that they cannot do it because they have other duties and responsibilities. And certain, you and I both know, command staff is so far attached that, so you're it, you're like the middle person. So I know it has an impact. And you did that for quite some time before you took an upgrade position as a sergeant in tactics. And this is where we're going to get into the next segment, which is so important. What I wanted to really touch on the fact is you come with a lot of experience. I know we'll have some really good conversations after you tell me your IA story about use of force. You and I have been talking on the phone about all the good stuff, and I say good meaning the process by which an officer, when they get involved into a use of force, a categorical, what they call critical incidents, and next thing you know, there's this whole process that an officer has to go through in order for the department to make a decision on your tactics, drawn exhibiting, and last but not least, if it was deadly force or the type of force. So we'll get into that. But I do know that you are one of 11 officers, you can correct me if I'm wrong, that was terminated because of the conditions that were mandated by the city of Los Angeles back in 2020, when there was this really bad illness where people were getting very, very sick to the point where some people were dying. And that's what we're going to talk about. I'm going to leave the floor up to you to kind of tell me how this all went about. But before you do that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but at some point the LAPD pretty much told you and the rest of us that you have to take the jab, because we have to make sure that you are going to be healthy when you come to work and when you're dealing with the public. But somehow, some way, that turned into a huge fiasco that became very unfair, very unreasonable. And I'll leave it up to you to kind of tell us what happened.
All right. So I need to back up just to give a little bit of history leading up and through this time period, starting in, what was it, February of
2020, I think it was.
Yeah, when we really first started seeing the effects of it. And I had it, and my kids had it. And I'm not shaking a stick at it, because it was the sickest I've ever been.
Okay.
And my daughter had it before me, and she was little. And after she was done being sick, she goes back to school, and all she's get up, Mom, I'm so tired. I don't want to go to school. I'm like, go to school. You're done being sick. Well, after 3 days of me having it, it was probably a month before I felt better. It took every fiber in my being just to make it through the day. So I'm not poo-pooing the sickness at all, because it was bad. Excuse me. So during this time, we were probably one of the few, if not the only academy that stayed open and continued recruit training. So in order to do that, the city agreed, well, in the department, will you, and post, because nothing happens without everybody knowing about it, you can stay open as long as the recruits are tested. And it was testing once a week, and anybody could test. If you had to go on a trip and you knew they were testing it at the academy, you could go sign up for their thing, and it was a rapid test where you'd get it that night or the next day, your results. But in order to keep recruit training, we had to, or the recruits had to test once a week. We were never mandated to test. Nobody was. And so we continued with recruit training. As it progressed, and it was probably a year into it, the jabs came out. And people were getting it. If you don't, you don't. If you do, you do. But people were being bribed, at first, hey, these are the saviors of society, go get them. And then when that kind of didn't work, I mean, people did go out and get them. Well, you could get a free donut, a free hamburger, a free meal, whatever it was. So then the bribes started, and I said, this is really weird when you start seeing that. And at the time, I knew that it wasn't a traditional jab. It was something else. And the information was out there, although it was being censored. It was not super difficult to find, but the information was out there. So anyway, as it moved along, we started hearing rumors that it was going to be mandated in the department, and started seeing it around the country and in other countries where they were mandating it. And I go, well, this is not good. So the city, the mayor, and the city council said, okay, you're going to get it. You have to get it. And if you don't, you can lose your job. But, if you don't want to get it, you could put in a religious or medical exemption. Okay, great. But because you're not getting it, you're going to have to test. And in the beginning, it was you're going to have to test, and the city will pay for it, and it's on duty. So people were putting in their medical and religious exemptions, and then we got 2 addendas to the actual mandate where it was, by the way, you're testing twice a week, and you have to use the vendor of our choosing, and you're going to be on the hook for the cost of the testing. And you're going to do it off duty. So the league saw this and said, hey, whoa, 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 because that was the last best final offer. They were I'm assuming all the union heads of the city workers were in talks with the mayor and the whoever else. And their last best final offer was, okay, you're going to pay for it, and it's going to be twice a week. So the testing company and the league actually had 3 or 4 vendors that were going to do it for free because they were getting the government money.
Right.
And it was rapid testing. You'd find out that day or the next morning. But the mayor chose, I think it was Pedram Solomon Poor, the guy on the police police and fire pension board.
Right. And if I may interject, the union, Los Angeles Police Protective League, they pretty much said, look, we have these vendors, just to get an understanding here, and they'll do it for free, but the mayor just pretty much ignored all that and said, hey, we're going to go with this particular vendor.
Yes.
And then you're going to have to pay for it.
Yes.
Okay.
And twice a week. Not the once a week like the recruits did.
Any particular reason why they made it twice a week, in your opinion?
Sometimes perception is reality. It was to make such a financial burden. It was more than your pension contribution a month. It was
Wow.
500 and something bucks a month. And a lot of people live not paycheck to paycheck, but that's a car payment.
Well, beyond their means, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
So it was punitive. And they made sure, and you couldn't go test with your medical provider, excuse me.
Right.
So they picked this company who just no bid contract, just happened to be on the police and fire pension
Right.
board. And it wasn't a swab, wasn't nasal or the mouth swab. It was a 23andMe type, spit in the vial, fill it up, put it in the container, and it got shipped to Kansas. So officers were doing this test, and on the package it says, hey, this should be administered by a medical professional, a doctor. And here they're handing them out. You spit in it and throw it in they put it in a
Like a
trash
tray.
can.
Uh-huh.
And then they'd pick it up and it gets sent. And if you were lucky, you had the results from that test when you were taking your second test in a week. And officers that were feeling sick, they'd go and test on the free testing that the department was offering everybody else to find out if they had COVID or not. And because they were waiting 4 or 5, sometimes 7 days for the results of the other one. The other thing, with that testing, to sign up to Bluestone, you had to agree that they could share your tests with other people in the industry, your tests and results. So you're signing away your rights to your privacy on your sample that you gave. And you couldn't go any farther in that process to say, I'm not agreeing to this. I'll test. And I wrote a 15-7. Can I test with the recruits? Because the league filed a lawsuit. I gave it to the captain. The captain did say he sent it up the chain, but didn't receive a response back. I asked to test with the recruits until the league's lawsuit was heard. And captain said he never got a response back. The league also, because people were calling the league saying, hey, their terms and conditions, we have to agree that they could use our samples for anything. They sent out an email. You know, everybody makes mistakes. But when you take a step back and really think about what they told us to do, you can't make this stuff up. In the email, they told us to consent under duress. Police telling police to consent under duress. I mean, if we were to tell a suspect that, you're going to consent under... I think we'd lose our job.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And when they said that, it's like, no, this is wrong. One, they're charging for a condition of employment, which is illegal. And that was across the city. We make pretty good money as police officers, but you're talking about janitors, you're talking about, that's a lot of money. It was a lot of money for me, but could you imagine making less and saying, hey, you're going to pay over $500 a month for something that you could do for free?
So contradicting on the part of the mayor's office and on the part of the union. It just, and for the purposes of the show, the league is the union, just to get that out there.
Sorry.
It's okay. And it seems as though what we're trying to accomplish here is just, let's get this test done, and you shouldn't charge me for that. I'm a city employee. I think that sounds fair, but it didn't turn out that way.
No.
And did you feel that under duress theory, right? Or I should say, well, if it's an email, it's not even a theory. It's actually...
it's out there.
Yeah, it's out there, and they're wanting you to do it. You think that's probably like a political pressure or just a pressure to say, look, you got to get this done because the mayor's office or the city, they're just, hounding us for this. Let's get this done.
And I'm not gonna assume why our chief didn't stand up.
Right.
Why our league eventually, and I'll get to that point, but made an agreement with the city when they were the prevailing party in that lawsuit. And I don't know what was promised. I don't know if anything was promised. I don't know And all I have is my perception, and perception becomes reality. And when you're telling people, and I get it, it's just go along to get along, and we'll take care of it. And that, to me, as a 32-year member, and I wasn't perfect, I made mistakes, but I held my oath. I mean, I believe in it. This job was a calling to me.
Right.
I wanted to do it since I was little. And I came on not to be a good female copper. I came on to be a good police officer.
Yeah.
And I would like to think that I did that. And, but when you make something punitive and discriminatory, me being unvaccinated, I couldn't promote, I couldn't transfer. I had to pay for testing for twice a week when once a week was good enough. And this, again, wasn't just police. It was
The entire city.
the entire city.
No, absolutely.
And so I had to stand up, and I had to say something. And to go along to get along, that's not me. That's like waiting, witnessing an excessive use of force and hoping a sergeant comes and stops it. I couldn't. What happens if the 11 of us didn't stand up?
Which is very, very important to get to, because, look, we're allowed to pass judgment by all means, and we're not going to have this bashing session. Hey, you know what? The union should have done this, and the city should have done that, and the mayor's office mandated to do this. Fine, that all happened, and I'm with you. There is accountability, 100%. But what I'm really interested to really want to find out is where the accountability really starts is the department, because at one point they told you you're going to go to a Board of Rights and get terminated.
Yeah.
Yeah, talk to me about that.
So, well, you know way more than I do. This is my first time through this. And I'll admit to it, because when I came on, I wasn't a big shooter. I'd never shot a pistol in my life. And so I wasn't great at it. So I had 2 failures to qualify in, I think, the first 2 or 3 years, and then I fixed it. And I ended up shooting expert. So, but
That's awesome.
that was my only, as accused,
Right.
that was it.
Otherwise than that,
My-
you never knew about this process.
No. And so, it was a learning process for me. And they had a rubber stamped investigation already done. They never came and talked to me, not one interview. And I was called into the captain's office, and
Okay.
he served me with the 161, correct?
Yes, the charge sheet.
And I had to turn in my badge and gun, and he said, clean out your locker. I didn't get the 30 days as stated in our MOU that you get for a Skelly response.
That's right.
The chief signed the 161 that day, and I was ordered to abort.
Okay.
And
If you can recall, sorry, interject. Can you recall when that was? Because I want to point out something.
I think it was December. Dang, it was like the 20. No, it's like this
December what? What year?
2021.
Okay.
It was December. I 9th maybe.
Okay. December 2021. That's fine. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
So
Turn in your badge, your gun. They told you for the next 30 days you're going to get paid, but you'll be waiting for this hearing. 3-panel member. I take it you took a civilian
Yes.
panel member. The chief pretty much says, hey, I'm directing you to this hearing. I'm recommending termination, but your fate lies on this hearing.
Yes.
Okay, and that was in December. What I would like to know, not me, what everybody would like to know is how long after did you go to your actual Board of Rights hearing? How long did it take?
It was done in May. We actually got 3 dates right away,
Okay.
which was good. And
Would that be May of 2022?
yes,
Okay, so May of 2022 is when it went down.
Yes.
Here you are, and how long did it take? Or what was that like?
Well, there's so much to say, and I know we only have a short amount of time. So
Yeah,
you're
okay.
getting the abbreviated version of it. So we had, I want to say 5 days of testimony.
Mm-hmm.
And Captain Casey, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
but he came and he told the truth, and he said he believed it was punitive, and
Mm-hmm.
that other command staff agreed, but nobody told the chief. And throughout this, and I will say I'm in contact with 4 other officers that we're going through the appellate process right
Mm-hmm.
now. And we all have everybody was saying, oh, this is wrong, but, what are we going to...
That's right. You got to get through
This
it.
is from command staff saying, oh, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And again, you can't make this stuff up. And we're supposed to stand up. Even when it's hard, we're supposed to stand up and say, hey, this is... You can have them test, but the punitive action and the discrimination that's occurring, it's not going to fly.
No, absolutely. Unjust and unfair.
Yes. So we went through, and they said, hey, during the testimony, and then not the penalty phase, what comes when...
Yeah, so you did the case in chief. Everybody, you opening arguments.
Yes.
The department puts on their case or bring in witnesses.
Oh, that's the other thing.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Of course.
So the first day, the advocate gets up there, and he's got a little PowerPoint up there, and he says, we're not here to discuss the morals and the ethics of this mandate or what's happening. I'm like, again, I was like, okay, so an officer can refuse one order: an immoral order, an unethical order, or an illegal order.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to talk about the morals and the ethics of this order. Which, again, you can't make this stuff up.
Yeah. Then what? I mean,
Well, they didn't even call me.
I don't want to stop you.
Well, no, they didn't even call me as a witness. So I didn't
Really?
get to respond for the Skelly to say my concerns, which I think if the chief saw it, it's like, okay, well, maybe we should fix this, because this isn't right. She could have tested with recruits. It was everything they wanted for tracking these people. As the city attorney said in my writ case, we
Right.
needed to track these people.
And you
could
did
have
it.
done it with the recruits.
Yeah.
So I didn't refuse testing. I just refused that testing. And so anyway, they didn't call me as a witness, and we went through the entire thing, and the board came back that I wasn't in compliance with the mandate. But during the penalty phase, because we had to come back...
Yes. You were found guilty, and now you're in the penalty phase.
Yes. And they said this is 32, because they look at your teams and everything else, which,
Right.
Again, this is an education experience for me.
Yeah.
And my poor lawyer, asking him all sorts of questions. He probably got tired of it. I'm like, I don't know.
Of course.
So what happens next? But anyway, so they came back and said, you can't fire her. She's a 32-year member of this department with a stellar career.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to send her back with a contract to test, because, again, I didn't refuse testing. I just didn't want to sign my life away. And so we're going to send her back with a contract. Well, we ran out of time. And so by the time we came back, I guess word had got to the chief. The chief said, absolutely not. She's fired.
Okay. When
Yeah.
when you say ran out of time, what do they mean by not running out of time?
To where I'd say, yeah, I'll go back. I'll test with the recruits.
Okay.
And I'll test.
And that was right there and then, and probably one of the last days of the hearing. And at one point, did they say that's too late, or?
No, they just said somebody had an appointment. So the advocate was like, no, that can't happen. It was,
Okay.
again, and this is what I talk about people taking it personal. The advocate, I don't know the man, and he could be a really nice guy.
Correct.
But during this board, it was like somebody put a gun to his head and said, "You're going to win at all costs." It was, you know, or maybe he believed it. Maybe he. I mean, I don't know, but he was acting like if he lost, they were going to take his dog away or something.
That's never too good to feel that way. I know when I was an advocate, I can only. It is ethical and it is moral. Let me start there. And you know what? Let the chips fall where they may. Go ahead and testify, and understanding what happened now because you're telling me the story. We have to talk about the why. You know, why would you neglect to do this? Why did you fail to do this? And you know, and let it be, right? And they did, and then decided we're going to do this contract, but someone said that's not the way it's supposed to go, and you're going to be terminated. Tell me how, because this is what's more important. Maybe you can kind of shed some light into this quote that I heard from one of our guests. It's so important. The punishment is not the penalty. The punishment is the process. And so I would like to know from December and May, here you are 5 months, right? To about 6 months. You're only getting paid for 30. And next thing you know, you're not getting paid anymore. You're not getting a check every other Wednesday. And here you're waiting for this. You're at home, your kids. I mean, what was that like, knowing that, you know, my destiny lies on this hearing, and there's a strong possibility that I'm going to end up getting fired and losing all this after 30 plus years?
It was the hardest thing I've ever done, bar none. I've been shot at. I've been in scary situations. You know, like everybody, we have a story with our families and tragedies, near tragedies. This was the scariest thing I've ever done, to stand up when you think you're by yourself saying this is wrong. It was the hardest thing. And God gave me the strength. It wasn't me. Yeah. Because if I was looking out for me, I would have retired. I could have retired and just said, sayonara, you guys, good luck. This place is not what I joined 32 years ago. But I couldn't, because, again, I took my oath, and it may sound corny, but my oath as a police officer means something to me. And what the city was doing, and the mayor and the city council, was wrong. Absolutely wrong. And it was punitive, and it was discriminatory. And again, and it came out in one of the boards that we were used as examples to scare people into submission. Yeah. And it is, you know, what we're seeing should scare everybody, whether you're for it or not. What they're doing is making the police scared to stand up against the city.
Oh, no.
And we should be keeping them in check. And the union, the league, should be keeping them in check. And it didn't happen. And, you know, the chief's appointed by the mayor. You know, he's concerned about his job if he goes against what the mayor says. And again, I'm not assuming anything on why people did what they did.
Correct.
But, you know, the chief in a podcast said, oh, you know, we made mistakes during this. He never admitted to what mistakes, and he didn't do anything to rectify those mistakes. And as officers, that's how we grow. We learn the most from our mistakes. But you have to admit to them, acknowledge them, and look at them, and use of force. That's what separates us from a lot of departments. Other departments, they get any use of force and something bad happens, they're like, oh, he did everything right. And you watch it, and I watch it, and we're like, oh my gosh, what are they doing?
Absolutely.
But we are very good at looking at things, and that's how our tactics have evolved.
Absolutely.
The mistakes that were made. Okay, well, let's change it to this. Or knowing what you know now, what would you have done differently? You could say you made all the mistakes in the world. Oh, I made a mistake.
Yeah.
But not to say what mistakes and did you do anything to rectify them?
I'm all about accountability. I can only imagine what you went through. My sentiment for this whole process is just, it's somewhat shameful knowing that I'm an LAPD alum, I'm an internal affairs alum, and certainly I'm a officer representation section defense alum as well. So I've worked both sides.
Well, I like you guys.
There you yes you do. And I
I'm
say that with the understanding that a lot of this could have been avoided. There's 11 of you that still don't have your jobs, and you know what? The accountability is on the department, and those are the lessons learned. In other words, what are the takeaways from this whole process with not taking the jab? And hey, these are the conditions. You have to do it this way, even though there's another way that's more cost effective and other sorts. But totally, perhaps the stakeholders next time there is some major illness, or God forbid it doesn't happen, but we can learn from this and not treat 32-year veterans to go through that. So I thank you for sharing that. I know that all the people listening and watching are going to be like, wow, I just can't believe the department treated you like that. But you know what? That's reality. Sometimes we do it to ourselves, and this is a perfect example, perfect incident, if you will, of what happened. One more thing before we move on in terms of the border rights hearing. I heard that it was somewhat modified to tell you that, look, we're going to go ahead and terminate you, but if you decide to take the jab within 30, 90, 60 days, you'll be fully reinstated and made whole and get all your money back. Is that something that, or that was just a rumor?
That's a rumor.
The board members never mentioned anything like, look, if you decide to take the jab, then you know what, we can avoid all this.
No, actually, in my board, it was Brian Taft, who was the czar of
the city personnel guy.
Yes, but he was the illness coordinator. And anyway, he said that the board was actually shocked. They actually asked him again. From the time when I was sent home, the determination that I was fired. To the advocate, to the department, it was just a dog and pony show going through the motions. That Brian Taft said if I went that afternoon and got a vaccine, I'd have to go and apply with the department again.
Yeah.
That it was already done.
Oh, okay, I see.
So, and I think this is the scary thing, and this is where it gets to where we're seeing the breakdowns in the judicial branch. I mean, we're seeing it around the country.
Oh, of course.
But in my writ, in the writs of everybody that have gone before me, because I was like right in the middle, and then I ended up being the last person.
And for the purposes of the show and people who are listening, the writ is your appeal to the courts.
The first level of appeal.
Got it.
The judge, I was hoping for a better outcome because of my story and the facts in my case, and even the other officers' cases, and we'd go and support each other and watch the hearings. But essentially, the judges are saying that in a state of emergency, the city can break the laws and do whatever they want. And everybody but one have been the prevailing party because they violated our Skelly, our due process. And so we won that. But they're saying that reinstatement isn't the remedy. Which is funny because Skelly, the case precedent, or the precedent-setting case, reinstatement was the remedy.
Yes.
And this case that they're citing is this Barber case, and he was a thief. He wasn't going to get his job back anyway. He got the Skelly violation, but in his case, reinstatement wasn't the remedy. But they're just looking at that little thing and not the precedent-setting case. So all of us are going up to the next level of appeals. Okay. And I know I was told that the other officers, I don't know about all 11, but at least I think 4 other officers couldn't afford the appeals because the league
didn't pick up the tab.
No.
Yeah, that's
it's
quite expensive.
disappointing.
No, yeah, totally. You know.
And then I would also like to add, and then I'll be done.
Move on to better stuff.
Maybe. The league was the prevailing party on their charging for condition of employment, that lawsuit, and Judge Birdsong said a writ of mandate shall be issued, enjoining the city from charging for condition of employment, and if anybody incurred any costs, that they be reimbursed.
Oh, okay.
So as we're going into these writs, we're citing this case, and the judge says, well, there's no writ of mandate. I'm like, wait, what? The league won. In February of last year, they said, hey, we won, and where's the writ? They made an agreement with the city. So no writ of mandate was ever issued, stopping the city from charging for conditional employment. So if this happens again, they're going to be back in court. And the thing is they said, hey, we're going to fight this, but when the decision came to make an agreement or get the writ thing, they never posed it to the members. Say, hey, we could do this, or they can appeal, and we're going to get tied up in court, and give the members the choice of we can make a deal right now, or if the city does appeal it, we'll continue to fight it, because it's your dues that are paying for this. So
Well,
we're relitigating charging for a condition of employment.
I'm here for you.
Thank
If you
you.
need it. We can talk about Skelly some other time. Please comment on the episode if you want to know about the Skelly response, and I'll tell you all about Dr. Skelly, because people don't even know that's actually a doctor, but
I didn't know either.
Yeah, well, no, not many people know. I teach this stuff with a Savage Training Group, and one of the block of instructions is a Skelly response. And when I ask these new sergeants and lieutenants, hey, you heard the word Skelly? They're like, yeah, well, did you know if he was actually a person? And then we go from there and we have fun with it. Thank you for sharing all that. It's super important. Now we move on to the segment of worst and best. And I chose worst first because I want to leave with a best note. If you just kind of, me personally, just from hearing your story, I would imagine this is the worst. And so if you can share something in your career that you thought was just the worst thing you ever seen or responded to.
Well, I will say that getting told, I mean, you see it in the movies all the time, give me your badge and your gun.
Does not sit well.
Worst day of my life. Well, no, it's not the worst day of my life. Worst day in my career for selfish reasons. But I think, and it goes to your mental wellness, that I was working mission when the train crash in Chatsworth.
Yes.
And I didn't make it until later that day. But that was, you see the coppers that actually responded to it, and they were horrified.
Absolutely.
As far as, the carnage that they saw. And we see carnage all the time, but on that scale.
Oh, that's devastating.
It really made me start thinking that we do a really bad job in when I came on, if you were the rubber gun squad if you went and saw any of the police psychologists.
Yes.
They are doing a better job now encouraging people to go, and it is helpful. And for anybody out there that's struggling, don't wait till it's too late. We have, officers take their lives all the time across the country.
Yes.
Because they don't want to be that guy that I need help, because we are I can do this.
Right. And to that point, those are tragic events that happen during your career. What I do know now is there's actually for science. There's like scientific evidence that shows, and I don't want to sound like some Dr. Marachi, but I just heard this stuff because I read a little bit. I don't read a lot, but I read a little bit. And what I heard was that there is research that when officers experience the disciplinary process, it has a major effect on your emotions and how you cope. And back then, right, to your 30 plus years, to my 24 years, and people who have been around 20 years ago, that was unheard of. It's darkness, and some people will call you and hold your hand and walk you through that whole process, but some people don't. And the ones that don't, it's ultimately the responsibility of the department, especially your command staff, to ensure that you're fine. And I'm not saying that they don't do a good job. I just think that we have more awareness, education, research, and there's actually like these firms where they actually have like law enforcement coaches to kind of walk you through those moments of darkness. So I thank you for that. What about Beck? Give me something good that just made you laugh or you were proud of during your 30 plus year career with the LAPD. There's got to be something you were just
and I tell the recruits when I teach them, I tell them, keep a journal and write this stuff down, because you forget it until you see your old partners and they say, hey, you remember this? And you're like, oh my gosh, I forgot about that. And you just, this job, and never in my wildest dreams I would ever thought, it's not the end of my career, because we're going to prevail.
Yes.
And, but that I would ever go through anything like this. I love this job. My husband used to give me a hard time. You're never going to retire. And I'm like, oh yeah, I am. But he might have been right. But this job, I'll tell you what, I used to see people going into work on the freeway and they're like driving like this. And I'm like, my daughter asked me, I was a sergeant and she's little, and I'm getting ready to go to work, and she says, Mama, what are you going to do today? And I said, I don't know. I'll tell you when I get home. What other job?
Yes.
And there's just too much good to pick one particular thing. Good. And I loved what I did, and it was never a job. Were there hard days? Yes. Were there days where it hit home when you saw just the absolute grief and agony of a parent who lost their kid? Absolutely. But it's such a rewarding job.
That's
and
awesome.
I love the department, and so proud to be a Los Angeles police officer, and it's all so good. And like I said, it's too hard to pick, and I thought about it for a long time.
Yeah, like what's the best that has happened? Look, now we're almost to the end, and you are way too humble to say how important, how great of a career you had. And of course I asked you to send me somewhat of a bio. I gotta. Not many people know this, but you're an expert. You actually, we're all about tactics. You and I have these conversations. Interesting to know that our language, believe it or not, now that I do teach for Savage Training Group, I go around and teach Northern California. We're getting ready to start teaching out of state. Not many people really follow you taught it. I just learned a lot from it because I responded to a lot of critical incidents. OIS, officer-involved shootings, being the most popular because that's what happens more often than in-custody deaths or LERIs, law enforcement-related injuries. However, I was always taught, especially when I had an appeal like, oh my God, the department, is out to get me because my tactics were out of policy, and I got an administrative disapproval. So my job in internal affairs, the way I was taught is with our beloved, I guess he's a rock star. He's more like he's just a total 100% SME, Andy Markel, who was your mentor.
Yes, he was.
And he would always tell me things like buzzwords that have so much meaning. Substantial deviation from department policy, tactics, and procedure. And that's pretty much what you're being judged on, right? And so you either substantially deviate or you didn't. Now, if you substantially deviated, the department's saying, look, that's fine, but you know what? You got to have a justification as to why. And he told me the formula. I know I called you, and you told me, and I wrote it down on my phone here somewhere, but you're going to tell me anyways what that formula is.
So it's the basic concept plus real world variables equals substantial deviation with justification or without justification. So just to,
sounds so fancy, but what it really comes down to is like, look,
there's going to be deviation.
Right. You're going to be out there. Nothing looks like textbook.
No.
Nothing ever is textbook.
No.
And you are going to deviate.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we teach, and the basic concept is anything written down. You have lesson plans, policies, the manual, anything written down is that basic concept. Mm-hmm. And so when we teach tactics, we're in a very sterile environment. We do bring real, I can never say it fast, real world scenarios based on things that have happened. And, do the scenario-based training with the recruits.
Yes.
So they'll make their mistakes there.
Yeah.
And realize when they do have to deviate from what we teach.
Correct.
Because when we go out into the real world, our traffic stops, you're going to be a car length and a half, a little car, back, offset, all that stuff. We don't tell them, well, what happens if they pull into a parking lot in a parking stop? Where's my car and a half length?
Yeah.
What do I do?
Mm-hmm.
So those are the deviations that, will happen. And a lot of things can cause deviations, whether it's the weather. We tell you never write a ticket in the rain, or never write a ticket inside the car. But when it's raining and we could hear the rain, the thunderstorm that was happening while we were
you got to
in
deviate.
here, yeah, you're going to write the ticket in the car. You can't write on wet paper.
Right.
So things like that. The other officers' actions. I remember at the end of pursuit, I know I talk too much, but
it's okay.
we
So
had
do I.
as a sergeant, we had a pursuit, and we're at the end of the pursuit, and it was right on the border of Mission and Foothill.
Uh-huh.
And the officer pitted him, and the van ended up perpendicular to our deployment. And so we're sitting there, the officers are deployed on it, I'm watching, and all of a sudden out of my peripheral, I see this officer come running up to the van, up to the front door of the van. We're like, well, it was a Foothill officer, but we didn't know who he was. And he ended up, I want to say, did he pepper spray him or what? We're just all like, wait, what's happening?
Right.
So now our tactics, our basic concept, high-risk tactics, we had to change because that officer put himself in a really bad position. So there's a deviation, which requires justification.
Got it.
That is a substantial deviation. He'd have a hard time justifying that.
Right.
And if they bought it, I'd be surprised.
Right.
But the officers that had to deviate to go get that guy would be justified.
Got you. No, totally. I would love to talk to you even more about all this stuff because it's fascinating. And we're going to get to closing because I'm going to leave the floor up to you to tell whoever's listening, watching. It can be, I'm certain whoever's watching or listening can be someone who's applying to become a police officer, a young police officer in a department, someone who's trying to promote to FTO, sergeant, lieutenant, hopefully even command staff is listening. to what you had, to what we're talking about. And
Click.
yeah, they're probably going to say, I don't think I want to hear this. But to me, I almost feel, 25 years later, I suppose I'm a little envious because now they have like virtual, they have those goggles and virtual VRs. I don't know how you feel about all that, but I'm certain the tactical application training today is completely different than what I went through 25 years ago, what you went through 30 years ago. And I would imagine it's for the better.
I'm not big in the virtual reality. I mean, we have a village, I see it where, you go out to divisions and stuff like that where, you don't want to be training in the parking lot where people can see you or whatever. I get the value of it, but we have a village and we actually have instructors that can act it out instead of, and I'm not a big gamer. And I will say this, when we're teaching the recruits and we're doing use of force and it turns into an officer involved shooting and the recruit will empty his magazine, whether it's in the FATS room or FOS, or
the simulator,
in
the village
with the paintball.
Yeah.
And the threat's done, but they're
right.
The question is, were you a gamer with like the war game, whatever?
That's right.
And they would say yes.
Yes.
So they had years of training that we have to undo in 6 months. And, sometimes it's good that they make those mistakes there so they're aware that they revert to their previous training, which is all that video games. Anyway, I digress. You just reminded me.
Actually, a good way to digress, to remind you gamers who are applying to become police officers, please.
Play. What's the Don't do Call of Duty or anything.
Or get trigger happy.
Yeah, and don't watch Cops or LAPD or any of those.
Bobby, thank you so much for showing up. I feel like I've known you all these years. I'm sure we've crossed paths. My classmate speaks very highly of you. A couple that I've talked to, someone said your name, and I called my classmate, and he goes, "Oh yeah, I know her very well." And I totally appreciate you sharing all this. A lot of lessons learned. Very best. I wish you luck, and if there's anything I can do as we proceed through the appellate process, please get a hold of me, okay?
Thank you. And, thank you for having me on and let me tell my story. When I tell people, they're like, what? They don't even know this stuff happened. And the rumor is that I retired. And for anybody watching, I didn't retire. I'm still fighting. And I don't think I answered your question as far as other than don't play video games.
Right. That's good. What else?
Stay humble.
That's right.
And admit to your mistakes. They are life's biggest lessons, and you can learn the most from your mistakes, but you have to admit to them and do something to fix it. Most officers that struggle are the ones, and you've seen it. I know you've seen it.
Oh, absolutely.
I didn't do anything wrong. And they continue down that path, and it ends poorly for them.
Self-accountability is super, super important. Great message. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Marlon, it was fun.
Thank you. Please, like always, be safe out there, and don't forget the code 6. Thank you. Goodbye.